about Everton. I think you can probably forgive Everton fans for feeling like scapegoats at the moment. The points deduction before their appeal has been heard based on a framework that doesn't seem to be written down anywhere and rules that are supposed to be changing later on this year. Is the Premier League's action on Everton an attempt to try and prove that it can regulate itself and take decisions on breaches seriously?
No. We take our rule book very seriously. It's a handshake between all 20 clubs. All clubs look each other in the eye and say, we'll comply with these rules. And they expect the board, if clubs don't comply with those rules, to take action. And obviously we have to balance, Everton are a very important member of the Premier League, and ever present. But we also have to think about the other 19 clubs and their fan bases and the decisions that we make. The charge was made in March 23 for the first Everton case. The case was then eventually heard in October. We did make a plea at the time to try and hear the case towards the end of the season, but Everton argued against that and the Commission agreed with them. That's why it was heard in October. And then the independent commission, I just made the point so everyone understands the process that we have. Charging decisions like that are heard by an independent panel, which is selected from legal and financial experts appointed by the panel chair, Murray Rosen, KC, and he's responsible for populating the panel and appointing the panel. The Premier League has nothing to do with it. So the decisions that are made in respect of the charge are out for the PSRs, and indeed the sanction were made by an independent panel, independent of the Premier League, independent of the executive, the board, and the clubs. So we think that process was followed to the letter. Everton have the absolute right to appeal that decision and that sanction. They are doing so. That appeal will be heard shortly, and we hope it will be efficiently held, and we'll find out the decision about that as soon as possible. And I don't believe it will affect the charge was made yesterday for a breach for the following year, full year 23, obviously where we charged both Everton and Nottingham Forest with breach of the same rules, the PSR rules.
But you think it's appropriate that Everton have suffered a 10-point deduction before they've had the chance to have the appeal heard?
Well, their appeal, it's a pending appeal, so the way that we have done it is that the points have been deducted pending the appeal. So whatever the appeal panel decides will then be, I'm assuming, the final deduction, and that will be, the asterisk will then be removed. So it doesn't really matter when it happens, as long as it happens in this season, and it will happen in this season.
But yesterday's second judgment on Everton includes the majority of the financial period for which they've already been sanctioned, in my understanding. I mean, do you accept, it's so messy, Richard, do you not accept that this fundamentally demonstrates the urgency in which we need an independent regulator to manage cases like this?
I don't think it's messy. And no one, it's a very solemn duty, I have to say, and I'm sure that Rick would agree with me. Nobody likes enforcing the financial rules. It's the first time the Premier League has done it. And these financial rules were brought in 2013-14. They were brought in with the specific purpose, post-Portsmouth actually, of ensuring that unsustainable spending couldn't go too far. And so there was a wrapper put around how much clubs could invest in pursuit of their aims. This is the first time we've laid a charge in this specific way. No one wants to particularly be doing it, but we must do it because we have to think about the rest of the clubs that have complied with the rules and also their fan bases, and that ultimately is the duty of the Premier League board and the EFL board in similar circumstances. So, because we changed the rules last summer, and we can't change the rules unilaterally, we have to do it with the club's permission, where there's a more expedited process, because it's a 3-year look back. The PSR are calculated on a 3-year look back, and in Everton's case, they were the decision was made on that case a year after, in the season after they were found to be in breach. So it's a very long period, which is why we brought in expedited directions to try and help that process work more efficiently.
But can you understand fans' frustration when Man City is taking so long? Meanwhile, Everton have had now
Yes, I can.
2 charges. Notts Forest yesterday charged.
I can, but they are very different charges. That's all I would say. If any club, whether they're current champions or otherwise, had been found in breach of the spending rules for full year 23, they would be in exactly the same position as Everton or Nottingham Forest. But the volume and character of the charges laid before Man City, which I obviously cannot talk about at all, are being heard in a completely different environment. There is a date set for that proceeding. Unfortunately, I can't tell you when that is, but that is progressing.
Can you give us you can't give us the status of the Man City and indeed the Chelsea investigations?
No, I can't give any details on Man City beyond saying that a date has been set. I can't tell you when that date is. On Chelsea, as you know, the new owners of Chelsea came forward with information to the FA, UEFA and the Premier League about previous ownership, and we're still investigating that. And we don't announce the outcome of that until we have completed those investigations.
Okay. And the other issue on this, it's being briefed that the Premier League are changing profit and sustainability rules ahead of next season. What's that going to look like?
Well, I think actually what that refers to is the fact that, as referenced around this table already, the Premier League is considering, with the EFL, is considering moving away from PSRs, profit and sustainability rules, to a squad cost ratio mechanism. And that is now in consultation, which would replace PSR in the future. PSR will be around this season and next as a bare minimum, and may even be kept alongside it. I don't know. All those decisions are yet to be made. There are no, as far as I'm aware, there are no further plans to the PSR rules planned at the moment.
Okay, and when will Everton find out if the takeover by 777 Partners is going to be confirmed by the Premier League?
As soon as we have completed the process, and unfortunately some processes take a matter of weeks, some if we haven't had satisfactory answers to the questions that we have asked, it takes a lot longer.
And so how long is this one going to take?
It has already been running for a number of weeks, so it's going to take longer.
And how much longer?
I don't know. I can't say. It is a very difficult question to answer.
Weeks, days, months, years?
Weeks. Well, hopefully weeks.
Damien, did you?
I just wanted to add on the sort of Everton front that can you understand why there will be a degree of cynicism among fans that we talked a lot about the cliff edge between the Premier League and the rest of football. There does appear to be a cliff edge inside the Premier League where if you're a really big club and therefore you can not only afford the best players but the best lawyers, then you get embroiled in legal matters that take 10 years or never come to fruition. Whereas if you're Everton or not or Forest, there's an expedited procedure, to use your phrase, where suddenly in the middle of the season they get knocked 10 points off and get threatened with relegation, where on the pitch they wouldn't deserve that. Do you understand the cynicism that develops around that?
I do understand the issue, and I've tried to separate the two in the sense that I've said that those standard directions are for everybody. They're not just for small clubs. So if anybody was found to be in breach and put forward their PSR calculation that was above the threshold, then we'd be doing exactly the same thing on exactly the same time frame. There's a very separate process for the other cases because they are fundamentally different in nature. Unfortunately, I can't go into all of that today.
No, but I mean, but
I do understand that from the outside looking in, fans are interested in what goes on the pitch. They're less interested in financial regulation unless it impacts on their club and how that works throughout the system. They are interested in fairness, and I think most fans want to know that the regulatory bodies, in this case the Premier League, will enforce the rules and will have significant penalties for breaching very important rules as a disincentive to do it. It is much better, obviously, that all of our clubs comply with the rules at all times, and therefore we don't have to talk about these things at all. That is the perfect world we'd all like to live in. It isn't the case at the moment, and so we have to go through this process. And we want to be transparent and open, we want people to understand it. And we're prepared to have a dialogue, and we're obviously continuing to work with the clubs involved here on how that process plays out.
There's a wider point in principle, I think, which does affect the integrity of the league, which is that if you get to a situation where 1, 2, maybe 3, 4 clubs start getting points deductions in the middle of the season, and that's the punishment that the football authorities reach for, then throughout that season the league is pretty meaningless. And suddenly, sorry, being a Reading fan, we got relegated by 1 point, having had 6 points taken off in April, in March. That kind of thing means that the whole league itself becomes a bit meaningless. So I do think it requires a bit of hard thinking on the part of football authorities about it's the underlying point of how do you punish owners who may have breached the rules, and absolutely they should be punished, without actually both punishing the fans and also, from just the league administration's point of view, making the league a bit meaningless. Because if the league starts becoming meaningless, then, we lose the game.
Just a perspective on that. One of the weaknesses of the rules, and bearing in mind that this started from UEFA, so Premier League, in a sense, had to adopt the financial fair play rules. It was a start. Football had no financial regulation, and one of my favourite expressions in football is that the opposite of doing nothing is doing something. May not be perfect, but at least UEFA had a start. One of the big problems and the challenges, and you're absolutely right about points deductions, is that you're looking retrospectively and punishing for things that might have happened 3 years ago. One of the big advantages in moving to squad cost ratios and controlling costs is you can do that in real time. So instead of having to look back at clubs and punish, you can actually, as leagues, refuse to register players. So you're actually monitoring, controlling budgets prospectively rather than retrospectively. Now, there'll still be complaints because you're constraining the squad, but then if you're going to have the philosophy of trying to keep clubs alive, you have to have some form of financial regulation. But I said operating it in real time and upfront rather than trying to look back 3 years is, we think, much, much better.
Thank you, Tim. Last but not least, Rupert.
In my position of last but not least, I must say, listening to all this, it does sound like everything is very Premier League stacked to these 12 or 13 or even 5 or 6. I mean, if, foreign buyers can come in when the warning lights were there, this Dai Young, I think he'd done this in China and in